the framework for having children was marriage, and that's gone.
The framework only works if everybody actually lives that. And the truth is, that's not true.
Parenting is the ultimate sign of maturity and responsibility.
I hesitated to come forward on this one because the term ultimately kind of has a lot of power to it. I think there are other ways that people show maturity, but when I think of what maturity is, I think that maturity is fundamentally selflessness, right? The thinking about others before yourself. And I do believe that one of the primary ways that a person can show concern for somebody else other than themselves is when they bring a child into the world.
You know, and I totally agree with you. I think ultimate is not the word we want, but I think it is about maturity. And I think part of maturity is caring for other people. And one of the things about having kids that's so incredible is they have so much to teach us.
How many kids have you got?
I have 3.
You have 3 kids, and I assume, I have a terrible thing to say. Are they all grown?
3 grown kids, my best friends.
I have 8 kids. My wife and I got married 15 years ago. We've had 8 kids together. And there's certainly a lot of room for personal growth and having a lot of children, because there's a lot of opportunities to care for somebody else. Again, like I said, more than I'm concerned for myself.
Can the disagreeers please step forward?
If you bring children in the world just to bring children in the world and not think about the consequences, that you have to take care of this human being for more than 18 years. It's an entire lifetime, and your entire lifetime, the rest of your lifetime. So a lot of people just are not prepared for that. They're just 21-year-olds that don't know what they're doing, but they're having kids just because society or their family has told them that they should.
Now, do you think that is primarily accidental children, people who weren't planning on having it, or do you think that's true of everybody?
I think there are some people that, like the kids on the Maury show, you see them, they're like, I'm 14 and I'm gonna have a baby. And it's like, they're being taught this because they're bought baby dolls and all this kinds of stuff. So that's their aspiration, is to have children instead of becoming a human being, understanding who you are, and then, having children after that.
Just because you have children, it doesn't mean you're necessarily mature. I run into people all the time. I'm 26, so I run into people in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s who literally should have never had children. All it takes is for somebody to be born, and depending on how they grow up, it's gonna make you or break you.
So how old were you when you had her, and did you feel like, what was that kind of turning point when you felt you were ready?
So I was 21 when I had her, and she was a really sweet surprise, but it was a surprise nonetheless. And I honestly, at the time, I wasn't ready to stop being selfish. I was like, oh my gosh, like my youth, that's it. Like I have to do a 180 now because I'm gonna raise a young girl. And it was a lot to adjust to, but at the end of the day, nothing makes me happier than being a parent.
But I just want to chime in. As someone who's older than most of the people here, what's fascinating is my generation, it kind of wasn't, there weren't that many options in terms of not having a kid. So a lot of times it happened by accident. It was just assumed you would get married, and then it was assumed you would have kids. So I had my first one when I was in my early 20s. And now that I have grown kids, my message to them was, you need to wait till you're closer to 30, because when you're in your 20s, you don't even know the questions to ask in terms of a marriage, let alone having kids.
Yep.
I think there are a lot of people that have been damaged from people believing that they should just have children. And then they were born, and sometimes born into poverty. Like I grew up in poverty. It wasn't fun. Like I'm not gonna hold you. It wasn't fun. A lot of things happened to me as a child. That wasn't fun. I didn't have an easy life. In order for me to break my own generational curses, it was best if I waited. And that was the most selfless thing I could possibly do, even if I wanted children, which I did.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if we get back to the definition of maturity, right? because we can be mature if we're holding down a job, if we're being financially responsible, if we're emotionally intelligent, if we're self-aware, if we're kind to others. There's a big list that we can fall under as being mature. And I think that it gets a little complicated when people who don't have kids, I am happily child-free, are said to be irresponsible because it just doesn't fit and it doesn't make sense. Because if you take that theory, someone who decides to have a child who is not ready for one, who's not emotionally ready for it, who's not financially ready, who is just has no idea what they're getting themselves into, then that's calling that person responsible versus someone, let's say, who's in their 30s, has really thought this out, has looked at all their options and has made the decision that this isn't for them. So the theory of one being more mature than another doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I like what you said because I truly feel like being responsible or being mature and having kids are two mutually exclusive aspects, right? Like, I think you can be mature on both sides.
Right.
But definitely, if you take a step back for those who choose not to have kids because, you know, they've done that self-reflection and they realize they're not there, and maybe they just simply don't want it, I think that also takes a lot of maturity. A lot of times, like, women are just looked at down if they don't have kids, and I think it takes maturity as a woman to be like, okay, maybe I don't need to adhere to these societal pressures.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes as child-free people, we're told that we lack responsibility, where in fact, can be quite the opposite, because sometimes, for example, I have a mother with Alzheimer's that I care for. So some of us care for our elderly parents. Perhaps there's a partner that needs care. We're taking care of nieces and nephews. We're taking care of friends. So there's actually so much responsibility in our lives already that we're choosing not to have kids because the plate is already full with tons of responsibility. So the fact that people still think that there is a lack of responsibility just doesn't add up.
So you have both kind of this idea of waiting and this idea of people having kids too young. And I think that both of those are dangerous generalities, because just because a kid is young does not mean that they're not ready to have a child. You said you had your child. It was a surprise, but you do not feel like you were ill-equipped. You did not express that you were ill-equipped. Me and my wife totally intentionally had our first child pretty quickly after being married at 22. Right? We were ready. And so I agree that a person needs to be ready, but it's not like ready as 31 or ready as 43.
Oh, no.
A person can be ready at 21.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, what are you waiting for? Right? If I'm waiting for all of my ducks to be in a row so that I've got the right amount of money and I've got the right job and I've got my house in Beverly Hills, and you're never going to be ready.
Never the
I
perfect
think-
It's
time.
never going to happen.
I think there's just to touch on what you just said. I think that's a common misconception. You know, like this idea that people are not having children or waiting to have children simply for financial reasons. Like in my case, I was sexually assaulted as a child. I went through a lot of very traumatic experiences. The death of my father as a child, and I think me waiting to have children was literally so I don't pass that trauma on to a next generation. And also, like, as a Black woman, I just didn't want to be a baby mama. I don't want to be anyone's baby mama. I don't want to be a baby mama. I don't want to be a baby mama. I don't want to be a baby mama. Yeah. So, and that's a stigma that Black women not exclusively go through, but I feel like we are criticized heavily for it. Like, single motherhood is not respected, especially for Black women.
You painted this picture as if the child was something that you were going to do by yourself. That was the expectation, is right? You have these people telling you just have your baby by yourself. Mm-hmm. Well, I would say you would never have a baby by yourself. And I don't mean that as a stigma against single moms, but I think a child is fundamentally a thing that two partners share together. And so if I was waiting on anything, I'd be waiting on that partnership whereby the two of us can support each other in this endeavor of having a child, because a child is a massive responsibility for one person.
I think that we're misconstruing the word waiting with the word desire. Because for one, and I'm speaking for myself, I am not waiting to be ready, and I was never waiting to be ready. There was a lack of desire from day one. So if there's a lack of desire, you're just sorting through your feelings about what this means for you.
I had no desire to be married and no desire to have children. This is not some thing that I carried with myself ever since my childhood, or I've been writing in dream books or whatever. I really had no interest in a relationship with anybody. And then I met my wife. And it was from my relationship with my wife whereby I desired to have a long-term committed relationship with her. I desired to express that long-term committed relationship in an intimate way, and from that we had children. So, my encouragement that I give to people that I'm talking to who, don't have that desire are great, fantastic. Don't have that desire. When the time comes and the person's there, the desire will come too.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. That's not the case with a lot of people. I'm gonna be 50 years old soon, and I have zero regrets, and every year I am more and more grateful for my choice. I spent 10 years trying to figure out if I wasn't gonna have kids, but in hindsight, it wasn't that I didn't know, it was that I knew, but everybody around me was telling me that I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was being selfish, that I was a terrible person, that I only cared about myself. So it just became so confusing to me.
I agree with you, I'm with you, but I did have a similar experience. I've lived 1,000 lives. I was a dominatrix when I was younger. I was homeless, I needed money, and just got into domination. When I say I lived, I've lived. And then I found my person, like I found my partner in life, and I got married, and then everything shifted a little bit for me. They brought something that I've never really felt before I met them, which is like that unconditional love, that grounding aspect of like walking through life with someone. It was the first time I ever even considered, could I be a mother?
As I've grown and dated a lot of guys and had a lot of relationships since that divorce, I find that the most incredible unconditional love in my life is from my grown kids and their partners.
Child-free people are on average happier.
I go on TikTok and all I see are like parents after parents after parents complaining about parenthood. Like they are just like, I'm overwhelmed. Like I watched like this TikTok of this lady crying into the camera, and she's like, I'm overwhelmed. Like she was sitting in her car and she was having a full-fledged meltdown. Like, my husband doesn't help me. I'm doing everything by myself. I feel like a single parent, even though I'm married. I don't go out. I don't have a life anymore. I don't get dolled up. And I'm just watching this lady's TikTok and I'm like, well, damn. Well, why would I want to be where she is? I'll go out dancing. I don't have to worry about a babysitter right now. I don't have to do anything. Those kind of videos and that kind of content, like they're being honest, and I appreciate it. And I don't want to shut them down. And those feelings are 1,000% valid. But as someone that doesn't have children yet, that watches that kind of like content, sometimes it scares the life out of me to have a child. Yeah.
I would say that if I don't have children, I have one less thing to be stressed about, one less life I have to be concerned about. I have 2 dogs, that's enough children for me. And so I don't have to I worry. I watch them on a camera every single day. I go out to the bar and I'm like looking at the camera the whole time. That's kind of stress that I've put on myself from having a dog. I couldn't imagine how it would be for having a child.
Yeah, for me, it's about controlling or minimizing that risk of the extra stress, like you said. And also just the trials and tribulations that you go through as a parent. I mean, I think we can all resonate to having hurt our parents before, and it's like, oh my gosh, if someone did that to me, I don't know how they would do it. I would freak out, you know what I mean? I mean, happiness can also equate to, not wanting to physically go through it too. I mean, as a woman, it changes your body completely. Your brain is different. Your abs split apart. Your boobs are they're different after you have a kid, and I think personally, I don't think I would be happy with, going through that physical change. I think for me personally, I think it took a long time for me to feel comfortable in my body, and now I feel like I'm there. And I just know that like if I had a kid, like I would just be so much different. I don't know if I would be able to accept that personally. This is the life that I like, and I'm happy with what I have.
I'm concerned that young people are being made to believe that one choice or the other is going to provide them the happiness that they need.
Yeah.
So if I see on TikTok, in Reels, when I see child-free people at the yacht, on vacation, having the best time ever, and although that can be true, and I have those moments, I don't want that to be a representation of if you don't have kids, that means you're going to have a happy life. Just like I feel that if you do have kids, that's not a guarantee for joy either.
We all have moments in parenting when we're like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And the question is always going to be balance, right? A lot of people are now going to TikTok and recording themselves in those moments and plastering it for the world to see. And it's kind of like,
Right, we're watching highlights of either extreme, right? The reality really lives in the middle.
You have to be able to understand and identify your personality trait and how you respond to things. And I don't have patience for children. I would be miserable. I would be absolutely like jumping off a bridge or something.
If you're not going into it wanting it, you're not going into it with somebody to support you, right? That's where it doesn't come.
Well, that's why I wonder how many people are coerced into having children. And then they change my thought processes, and then I have a child I didn't want to have before.
If that's not a conversation you're having before you go into the relationship and coming to some understanding between the two of you about where y'all are going to exercise that, something's wrong.
What your side sees from our side, they're like, oh, well, they're so stressed with kids all day at home, and it is really overwhelming. We talk about it all the time as parents. So maybe from your side, I feel like people see us like, oh, well, life stops, and now because they're so overwhelmed, like they must be unhappy.
Well, that's what people tell us, though. I think if we're gonna have an honest conversation, that's literally like what, especially young women, that's what we're told. You have to pick a career or you have to be a mother. You have to pick a life of having fun. But then when you have children, it's all over and you have to give all of that up and be at home with your children, or you're a bad mother. And if your children become, not the best people in society, it's all your fault. We're gonna blame the woman for everything that goes wrong with this human being that you made. It's a lot of pressure.
So you say that society is telling women they have to pick. Do you think that's arbitrary? Or do you think that there is an institution that exists in society that understands that they're going to get something more? They want you to be that powerful woman. They want you to do this. They want you to give up childhood or having children because that's what's going to make the society or the corporations or whoever you want to call it more successful.
I actually think that it's a little bit different. For me personally, it was the conditioning that women, to find joy, needed to do it all and have it all. And you're raised to believe that that's where the joy is, right? People say you can do it all. Now you have the ability to do it all, right? Now we're beyond the women's movement where you're given the opportunity to work, to go to school, to have an education. All that, but you still need to be a good mother and be a good partner and take care of your local community. So to me, I was conditioned to believe that that's where their joy was and having it all. So I really needed to deconstruct that.
But the whole point of roles and framework is to create this environment that is likely to succeed. Right? And it's not likely to succeed if a woman is having kids and going to work and cleaning the house and taking out the garden. You can't do it. That's too much.
Yeah, but then the alternative, and this is the issue that I have, the alternative that we are given is you can't do it all, so then you should just pick being a mother. You should just stay home. And if you don't aspire to be a mother, something is wrong with you.
But here's the deal. You don't have the choice because there aren't men anymore who have been raised to be responsible, contributing members of the household. One of the sad outcroppings of the feminist movement was the demasculization of boys. So you look at the general landscape of young boys, a lot of them are happy to stay at home and live with their parents for 6 years after high school. A lot of them are happy to let their wife go and work and do all this.
And that's because of feminism?
You said, women, what's going to make you happy and successful is to have all of this stuff that men have. Let's get them out of the way and give it to you. But what did the men pick up in that? Did they pick up staying at home, raising the kids, cooking breakfast for you? No, they didn't.
I think
Because that messaging didn't come
I
through.
don't agree with you at all.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on right
I'm
now.
not tracking what you're talking about.
because you know
I don't get it.
Again, I was a boomer.
I blacked out.
I was a boomer, and I raised 2 sons. And what those sons saw was how hard their mother worked. And I know, because I know them today, they're like, my wife or the women in my life are not going to work like that. So these young men who are in their 40s or 50s are cooking and loving taking care of the kids, and they're very different than their fathers were. And they're not expecting the woman to do everything. They're saying, in fact, one of my sons cooks more than his wife cooks. He loves it.
But when you talk about the proportion of men that are driven to success now versus 20 years ago, I don't think it's the same. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's the same. But I do think that men have abdicated their responsibility, and one of the primary places they've done it is in fatherhood.
what I wanted to kind of circle back to the prompt too and say was that there's a solution for everything in life. Like, I think if you find yourself really unhappy in a situation, whether it's by yourself or with your partner, you then have to look inward and be like, okay, hey, I'm not happy here for whatever reason. Why am I unhappy? Okay, now you figure out why you're unhappy. Now, what can I do? And that's kind of the rut that I see a lot of parents and a lot of or people who don't have children in. They're scared to change.
I feel like happiness is also a very fine line, because I've seen around, just in my personal life, and I mean, it really hurts seeing it, that sometimes people have kids because they think that it'll make them happy. And I think that there's a lot of risk there, and I think there's a lot of assumptions, and I don't think that you should bring in life in hopes that it'll make you happy.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's where the disconnect is.
Or to
And
save a marriage.
It throws me off when I hear people say, I had a child because I wanted to be happy. You're putting so much pressure on that child to make you happy that they cannot even grow into who they are, who they were actually meant to be. Can they go out into the world and live the life that they actually want to live? Or are they living just to please you?
Religion forces people into parenthood too early.
There are certain cultural and religious reasons that people have children. I mean, in the Bible it says go forth and procreate, so that's their goal. And I feel like people have passed that forward with every generation, and I feel like that's part of why I think that people should just wait a little bit longer to have kids, because like I said before, financially, and then also in my 20s, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was very aggressive when I would argue with people. I grew up in that kind of argumentative household where arguing was normal. Like, being aggressive and screaming at people and like throwing hands and stuff like that was very normal. And I had to, once I started living life with other people, other adults, I realized that that stuff isn't normal. I had to like de-escalate how I react to things, and like my anger and my issues, I've had to work through all of that. And I finally found, as I've hit my 30s, I'm like, oh, I'm calm. I don't need to go out and party anymore. Like, I'm financially secure. I've done everything I need to do, so I could have children. I don't think I'm ever gonna have kids.
I get that question or that statement a lot about religion, about this is what I was meant to do, that I was put here by God to procreate. Now, it would be silly if I'm going to argue with someone's faith and belief systems, right? Because that's a whole other show and a whole other conversation. But I do personally know people in my life, and I have friends who actually went through many, many years of IVF in their mid or early 20s because they were expected to have children in their faith-based communities, and everybody around them was having children. And they had lots of health issues, surgeries, and 5-10 years later, they come to realize, oh, this is not actually what I want to do. This is what my community, my faith-based community around me wants to do.
They've kind of set those standards and like not necessarily force it upon people, but in so many ways. There's a popular song by a country artist, Casey Musgraves. It's called Merry Go Round, and she's like, if you're not having kids by 21, you're pretty much going to die alone. And that's pretty much the sentiment. Is like, People look down on people who don't have children. They think that they're miserable and alone and cat ladies and cat men and whatever.
Yes.
I think that's just regressive and an outdated way to think.
Sometimes I talk to people who are originating from faith-based beliefs, and when I ask them, well, how many child-free people are you friends with?
Yeah.
How many child-free people are in your immediate circle? And the answer has always been none,
Yeah.
0.
Yeah.
So I can understand if I'm surrounded by a group of people that are all having kids. I've never met anyone who doesn't have kids. I don't know what they're like. I don't know what their lives are like. So I can definitely understand how people can just assume that potentially that's the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Religion is a framework, right? And for people who are religious, it's a framework around what we believe to be true. So you made a specific statement in there where you're like, I can go pursue this outside of my religion and still be a good person. Well, that kind of defeats the point of having the framework. I mean, if I believe what I believe, I'm going to operate within that framework. That being said, I don't think frameworks are bad, right? You're going to have a framework of some sort, whether it's a secularistic framework, whether it's a Eastern framework. You're going to create some set of rules and ideas by which you operate your life, right? And so people who have a religious affiliation build a religious framework. And in those religious institutions, for the most part, if the religious institution values children and family, they will typically have institutions and structures to support children and family.
I like your use of the word framework because I understand the idea of sticking to a framework and believing in that framework, but I have a different thought about it because I think that frameworks can be either really be solid or they can be permeable. And I think that we each have the choice of what that framework looks like for us.
If you think about framework, it's not about how things have to be, it's about how things can be. And then people get to choose. Now, there are some religions where you don't get to choose. If you're part of that religion, they tell you what to do and you do it. And whether you call it a cult, some religions are like a cult. And you don't have a choice unless you leave. Hopefully today, especially young people coming up, have so many options to consider different ideas and then decide, well, I could be part of that religion, but I may not accept everything that they want me to do.
I don't necessarily think that it's specific religions pushing children onto others, but more so about who they're having children with. So for example, like one of my best friends she's Hindi, and her parents, they're like, if you don't bring a brown boy home, it's not happening, you know? Or a lot of parents are like, if he's not Christian, if he's not Muslim, you can't be with him.
I am a gay person, so it's very hard for me to even remain religious because, all of the judgment, all of the hatred that I have experienced. Religion sometimes can be oppressive. I wasn't able to question my identity and, really find out who I was as a person because I'm supposed to be with a woman. I'm supposed to have children. And on that topic, there are people out there that don't think I should have kids at all.
I would assume that most religions wouldn't not support having kids. I think if anything, they probably would encourage having kids so that, the offspring can continue that religion and, you can create a family unit that supports and believes in the same thing. So, I just felt like the word force was strong, and I think it's really hard to generalize.
Women's career is more impacted than men's when they have kids.
I think motherhood is beautiful, and I think that a lot of people don't recognize that it's basically having another full-time job, probably more than a full-time job on top of your full-time job. So I think there's also a stigma against women who have kids. I think sometimes they are looked down on. Maybe they don't seem as competent because their minds aren't as focused on their jobs. I definitely do think that women are more impacted by men, and I think there's a reason why so many men are in power, and I don't think that's a coincidence at all.
Women are just judged way more harshly than men when we don't have children. I especially on a timeline, hello, tick, tick, tick. I'm not gonna sacrifice my career to be a human incubator for the government to populate this country, and they're not even supporting me when I have the child. I'm on my own.
There's a lot of times in motherhood and in my parenthood where I do feel alone. And, thankfully, her dad is very much present in the picture. We're together. We've been together for, gosh, like 11 years now. So he's there, but there's times where I'm like, oh my gosh, babe, you're working all day and I want you home. Like, I'm so overwhelmed with the baby. I mean, it also did put a strain on a little bit of my relationship a little bit, because for me, him going to work wasn't enough. I was a stay-at-home mom for 3 years. And it's crazy because while I was pregnant, I was going to school and getting my degree for surgical technology. I remember when I started working, I got this great first job out of school for a plastic surgeon, and I was so happy, but it interfered so much with my schedule and the people I have to take care of that I had to stop working.
Well, and again, as a single mom, it's like you just have to be more creative than the single dad does. And that is our society, you know, the gender base of our society. The women have to be more creative. Like, I had to find somebody, and I did, somebody who lived with us. I was teaching at the time, and I found this student, and she missed her big family, and I said, you know what, you need a family, and I need a grown-up, so why don't you come and live with us? This is before we called them nannies. So this wonderful woman came and lived with me, with my 3 kids, and it worked. But the point is, it's just too hard to do it on your own. You have to find someone to help you. And again, if we had a society where paternity leave was expected, but it's not, because they just assume, the society just assumes, well, no, the women will take maternity leave, a short one, but the men don't need to. Well, why not?
If there was more support on a societal level, like, I think more people actually would have children. I think the reason a lot of people, well, some people don't have children is because they don't have enough support.
So we had a bad institution before women came into the workforce, which is that success for a man was based off of essentially how far you were up the career ladder, right? If you were the CEO, that meant you were better than the VP, which meant you were better than the president. God forbid you be a labor worker, right? That was kind of the attitude. And when women came into the workforce, y'all inherited that. But the reality is that children are not a competing piece, they're a different piece, right? They're a different thing that adds fulfillment. So I may be a person who gets my fulfillment by being the CEO of a company and making millions of dollars a year, or I may be a person who gets my fulfillment by having children, and I don't need to be that high up on the career ladder. So yeah, I think it impacts women more because you don't have a choice. You do have to go deliver a baby. You do have to recover from that. Men, they can force us to come to work the next day. We're not, but I think that's really the problem with this, is the fact that career success is defined by how high up the ladder you make it.
I slightly disagree with that. There are a lot of women of color in particular that have children and then they're back to work immediately because they don't have a choice, right? And I definitely want to highlight that because we're not all speaking from the same point of view and experiences. On a socioeconomic level, women still make less than men in the workplace. And so it's not always trying to climb the ladder of, the corporate ladder and just trying to be a CEO or trying to be a vice president and trying to outdo the next person. Some people just work really, really hard and still don't make enough. I think society is giving women the option of you can have one or the other. And I think that's the real problem.
It's so interesting. My husband and I were we're in the same industry. He's a rapper, I'm a singer, so we're in the music industry. And when we go out, or when I go to shows or events or anything, and a lot of the time I don't share the fact that I have a child because it's the people, if I do share it, they're like, oh, well, where's your daughter? But nobody's ever asking him that. When he's outside performing on stage, crowd surfing, nobody's asking you that to everybody else. He's just this lit musician and he's doing the best, but she's a singer, but where's her daughter? There's just all these assumptions that go out towards women that men don't have to deal with. So I think there is kind of like a ceiling there.
I wouldn't want to have kids without a partner.
I'm from New York, I'm from Harlem, so I grew up watching many single moms do it every single day, no matter what the circumstance, no matter how they got to it, they did it. And I respect it so much. You can't take anything away from a mama that she got all her kids together, whether she's with someone or not. For me, in my experience, you know, I'm going to sit here and say that it just makes things so much harder.
Well, I would say for 18 years, a kid is being raised. And they're either being raised by you or they're being raised by somebody else. But for 18 years, the kid is being raised. And when you have one person doing it by themselves, they're going to give some amount of that time to somebody else to do it. So if you've got two people, then whether you're both working and you're doing shifts or, you know, you're kind of working it out, there's more time that you as the parents are spending developing that relationship with your kids. And just from a, you know, financial and, you know, when me and my wife got married, we were 22 years old. She had just finished her college degree. I hadn't finished mine yet. And I went and got the first job I could, which was I was a key carrier at Dollar General, making $8.50 an hour. We had our first kid, renting an apartment that cost us $550 a month, me making $8.50 an hour. And she stayed at home. We made it work, but we couldn't have made it work if I had to pay for daycare. We couldn't have made it work, and those are the kinds of things. So, I mean, technically, we had that kid in poverty, right? $8.50 an hour household income, right? But we made it work, and over that time, because there were two of us contributing this, we had a much better chance for success than somebody who's trying to do it on their own.
My mom was a single parent, and we were left at a lot of different people's homes to babysit or to, I don't know, help her out essentially. And someone took that opportunity to violate me in one of the worst ways possible. If I had to become a parent because of that experience, I would want to always be the one with my children. And that's a personal decision. I don't judge anyone else that chooses differently, but because of that set of experiences that I had, I would want to be with my children, and I cannot do that without someone else in the home. My mom was a single parent. I saw her struggle through everything. I mean, things that my cousins who had both of their parents didn't really struggle with. And the difference in our households were so obvious.
I really believe it's a luxury to have both of your parents. Like, I'll give an example. My daughter was scared to go down the slide for maybe like the first 2 years of her life. I'm like, oh my God, like, why aren't you going down the slide, girls? Just a slide, come on. Her dad comes one random day, takes her to the park, boom, now she can't stop going down the slide. But in my brain, I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I've been trying to nurture you, you know, it's to show you it's okay. But maybe I took a step back and I'm looking now, I'm like, maybe she feels more protected because her dad is there now, you know?
It's a generational thing too. It's like, you know, my generation, it was like, you know, if you wanted to sleep with somebody, you married them. That's what you did back in the 50s or even the 60s. And today, I think what's much healthier is people, your generation, are taking more time. Let's live together for a number of years, then maybe let's get married. But it doesn't all have to happen quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other sort of corollary to that, just sort of to listening to all these stories, is remember that I said when I was a single mom, it's like out of the blue that I found this wonderful woman who was my student who wanted a family and I needed someone to help, so I found someone to help. Wasn't the father, he was off in graduate school, but it was a person that lived with me who was very involved with my kids. We're still friends to this day. So, you know, again, I think it's about being open to the fact that there isn't just one answer to any of these issues. It's about looking for the right answer for you.
Yeah, but I can't agree. I don't agree at all that the solution is more time together in a non-committed way. That's where, because that kind of goes back to the conversation we were having about framework, which is the value of me finding somebody who looks at the world the same way I do and entering into a relationship with them is you get through a lot of those assessments.
But that's not realistic. People change.
Yeah.
I was not the same person, like even 5 years ago than I am today. I didn't even want the idea of children. Literally, you know what I mean? I didn't even want children. I got married, and then I started thinking about this is a possibility, and I think that's fair, right? Just like what you're saying is fair for you, right? But for me, for other people, I think taking more time sometimes is the best thing to do for the child. It's the most selfless thing you can do. Instead of rushing and hoping that the other person never changes.
But I just firmly believe that is a consequence of changes that have happened in society over the last 50 years. That's not a positive one. It's what we're doing to make up for the fact that gone are the days where you understood that if you got married or that if you had a child, you were going to be in a committed marriage. Now, that's not to mean that people didn't get into marriages that they shouldn't have because they had a child. But there was this idea that the framework for having children was marriage, and that's gone. And so when I'm into a relationship, I don't know if I'm going to drop a kid out and then the guy's going to run away.
Okay, I disagree. And the reason I disagree is because we've all, well, maybe not all of us, but I've heard lots of stories. I have a lot of friends that have grandparents from a whole different time than us. They valued marriage, they got married, they had children right away. And you know what happened? A lot of those wives got cheated on. They have families across town. They're making children all over the state. They're populating all over the place.
Some of the men are closeted.
Closeted. I mean, hello.
But they stay in the relationship.
But but you are supposed to stay in that relationship and stay committed. Do you think those wives were happy? Do you think that they felt fulfilled as mothers, knowing that my children have siblings halfway across town? If we're talking about framework, the truth is the framework only works if everybody actually lives that, right? And not just says it out loud, but actually lives that. And the truth is that's not true.
But statistically speaking, divorce is higher now.
Sure.
Right? Cheating is higher now. Is that a good thing for marriage and family? No, it's not a good thing for marriage and family. Why are they more common now? Is it just
I don't think they're more common now.
Yeah, the
I think they're
internet is
being
widespread.
exposed.
I think it's more exposed more. I
Yeah.
think people talk about it more. I think women actually have a choice to leave if they're cheated on. Men have a
Exactly.
choice to leave if they're cheated on. I think there's more of just general conversations about what people actually want to be happy. But the truth is, there are a lot of people that were back in the 50s and 40s, they were cheating.
Cheating left and right.
They had multiple
They didn't have the
partners.
internet.
Just didn't get
But
caught.
the women
No
couldn't have a
phones.
job, so they couldn't leave.
I don't think anything. I think a lot of the stuff that was hidden in the past has come to light, and I think the internet has helped with that because we're exposed to so much now.
So the reason I didn't step forward with this is because I'm so solidly and confidently child-free that having a partner or not having a partner is just not part of my decision or my equation. And I feel that very strongly, and I want to be an example for other people that are considering this lifestyle, because I run a global child-free community and a program, and something that people are constantly saying to me is, well, people tell me once you find the right one, then you'll change your mind. And I'm not saying that that can't happen, right? You gave us an example of how that worked out beautifully, but putting the pressure on someone to let them know once you have a partner, then it's okay, takes away their power of making their own choice.
The reason why I sat down was because if I had to have a kid in whatever situation, I don't know, I was playing Sims or something, and I had it, I would like to have someone there to support me and the kid, because I think that it takes two to tango.
Yeah.
And I think two people made that decision, and I think that, I know there's a lot of discourse, or there's a lot of things that can go wrong, whatever, but in a perfect situation, I think you owe it to the kid to, be a responsible parent. And I think, if anything, two people who have the same goal can really contribute to the nurturing of a kid.
I've been with my guy for so long. I'm 26 now. I've been with the man since I was 15. So that's basically my whole life, right? And I'm sure we all know many, many things can happen in a span of 11 years. Mm-hmm. And you can choose to go through it, or you get up and leave, but we chose to deal with it head on. And I think the reason why we're so strong in our relationship now, stronger than ever before, is because we were able to grow with each other. What makes it special now is that since we have our daughter, the more we choose each other, the more we see her blossoming and flourishing from love. I always tell her, you were made from love, okay? There's nothing in this world that's gonna make us love you any less, and we just try to let her know we're always gonna be there for her. So for me, it's more ideal to have just someone by my side.
I'm a real believer that friends are the family we choose. Mm-hmm. And some of the most important people in our lives that we're not related to. Mm-hmm. And when I was a single mom, it's I was married very young, and the dad and I, we just grew to be different people. So, it wasn't about bad news, good. We just grew to be different people. And so I took the 3 kids and left. And I moved to a small town in Wisconsin, and there was a couple who became family. I wound up having this support group, none of whom I wasn't related to any of them, but I had a support group.
that's a privilege. That's, not everybody doesn't have access to that. It's not just something you can turn over a couple of rocks and find, right? And that's where, when we think about specifically, the young Black female community having these children, and whether it's with auntie or cousin or whatever, taking care of the kids all day, and bad things happening, like you said, they're trying to do that, and in theory they have that, but it's still not ideal.
There's a certain level of, you can do bad by yourself. You don't need no man. That's actually hurt a lot of Black women more than it has ever helped us. And I think when it comes to like being a mother and like entering into single motherhood, that's why I don't want it. And it's because I literally have examples all around me, right? Of like Black women who they're doing an amazing job doing it on their own, but it doesn't make it easier just because they can. Specifically for like the Black community, I think we need to evolve past this whole like wanting to have children out of wedlock. And I'm sorry, that's just my opinion. It has not benefited us any. Black people, we're in a different position in this country, right?
My mom used to work as a foster care mother for a private foster care agency, specifically for newborns. So she would get newborns, a day, 2 days out of the hospital, and she would keep them for 2 weeks. Almost all of her babies were Black. Specifically when the Black community, that mother would reach that point, she'd have the baby, she'd be considering adoption, and within that first 2 weeks, there would be so much cultural pressure for her to keep that child that a huge percentage of them were taken back, because that 2 weeks marks until you can't revoke the decision, right? So many of those babies would come back. I say that to simply say that when you talk about the social pressure of these moms to start being moms without thinking about their self-interest, that was there.
Like, I don't feel like I get pressure to be a mom because I'm Black, right? Like, I feel like I get pressure to be a mom because I'm a woman. What a lot of people don't take into consideration is the intersectionality of being a Black woman. I'm both, right? Like, I don't get to exist as one or the other. We sometimes are taught, unfortunately, by even other Black women, you don't need a man, right? Like, you can do it on your own. And I think at this point, it's a mistake for us, and that's all I'm saying. For the single moms out there that are killing it, that are doing the best that you can, that are raising your children, kudos and good for you for doing that. I just don't want that for myself. I don't want to be another statistic. I don't want anybody on this planet to ever refer to me as a baby mama. Too many times we are, as a society, very harsh on Black single mothers instead of looking at the circumstances for how it happened. And I refuse to raise children without somebody else being in the home, whether that was with a woman, whether that was with a man. I just don't want to do it by myself, because I see with my own 2 eyes, not what the news told me, not what TikTok told me, I see with my own 2 eyes what that actually looks like, and I don't want to be the glue that holds everything together.
The most meaningful way to leave a legacy is having children.
Actually, I'm stepping over here. I don't necessarily think it's the most meaningful way, but I want to leave as much of myself here when I'm gone as I can. Whether it's my music, my career, who I am, the memories I share with other people, I want to leave as much of myself as I can when I'm gone. And I think when I am gone and my daughter is still here, I mean, my experience, everybody tells me, oh my gosh, you look just like your mom. Oh my gosh, you remind me so much of your mom. I go a long time without seeing my family members, and they're like, oh, you're so beautiful, you look just like your mom, you act just like her, you laugh, you smile. And that makes me feel so good, because I love my mom so much. She's my best friend. She held my hand through everything, and I hope to do the same with my daughter.
I stepped forward because I'm one of those people who I never thought about getting married, and I never thought about getting kids. Mm-hmm. All I thought about was I wanted a theater career. I went to a huge high school, and in fact, Charlton Heston went to the same high school, and Anne Margaret went to the same high school. There were all these famous people, and I thought, I'm gonna have a career in theater. And when my first son came along, and it was a surprise, This is back in the day when, again, there was different kinds of birth control, but he was born, it was like the birth control was 99% safe and he was the 1%. I'm like, oh, I guess he really wanted to be born. And I had no idea what I was getting into, and I thought, well, the other things will follow, but I wouldn't have missed him for the world. And then his brother came along, and his sister came along, and all I know is we all learned so much from each other. And we all still can make choices, and we all have career choices, and we're all doing the things that make us happy, but I wouldn't have missed them for the world. And like you, I just feel like I want my kids and my grandkids to know who I am. And when I'm gone, they'll appreciate what I gave them and doors I opened for them.
Yeah, you live on through your kids.
A common trope that you hear in parenting is, oh, I live vicariously through my children. And I think that's the one piece of that prompt that when I think about legacy and children being legacy, there's in that this kind of tone that I want them to take some piece of me through them. It's wonderful when it happens in a positive way. It's not wonderful when it happens in a negative way, when I'm trying to make them a doctor, or I'm trying to hand over the family business, or maybe my kid did not have a good experience with me and I'm trying to force a relationship that isn't there. So that's the main reason that I hesitate. I don't want my kids to feel like they're living their life for me. At some point, they have to take it on and live it for themselves.
I think there's tons of people who never had children, or we're also forgetting that there are people who are infertile. So are you saying that they can't have a legacy because they can't have children? I think that there are tons of doctors and physicians and philanthropists who have things named after them, and we all know, we don't know them, but off the top of my head I can't think of them, but we all know that they're there, like the Johns Hopkins, all that kind of stuff. So those legacies are remembered by everyone. So that's the kind of legacy I would want to leave, is like doing something that's so impactful in the world that I have something named after me.
I agree, and I think it's really important to realize that you can leave a legacy without bringing someone into this world, and I think that you can do that through different channels, like what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. This is a question that we as Childfree people get all the time. Well, what about your legacy? But to me, you said the exact word I was thinking of. To me, legacy is the impact that you have on the world while you're here. That's your legacy, and your impact can be your contribution to be kind to others, to teach others, to guide others, anything that is helping other people in any way. But what I do find interesting about this conversation is that oftentimes it's child-free men that get the legacy question over child-free women. For example, my partner, obviously he's child-free as well, and he always gets the, well, what about your DNA? Yeah. What about your legacy?
Bloodline.
What about your bloodline?
Yeah.
And it's very different for women because we don't get it as much. It's very different, and I find that really interesting. That
I've never gotten that question
about
legacy.
Because it comes from a time of kingdoms and passing down your bloodline. So I think that if we could all just flip the word legacy to impact, especially as the child-free community for child-free people, is we can understand how we're leaving a mark in society.
Right.
I'm Catholic, and one of the most legacy people of modern history within the Catholic Church is Mother Teresa of Calcutta, who was a child-free person, right? She made her whole life serving the poor in India. That is an amazing legacy that had nothing to do with her having children. Now, if you asked her, she'd probably say the people she served were her children. You can get into that, but it doesn't matter, right? The point is that the legacy that's remembered for her and will be institutionalized certainly within our religion forever is the work that she did for the people in Calcutta.
When you're talking about legacy, it's like you're having the child again for your own reasons. Like it's because of you. It's centered around you. The child has to now live up to whatever you want and who you want them to be. It's just a lot of pressure. I've never been questioned about legacy. I've been questioned about what do I want to leave behind or who's going to get my assets, which is interesting.
Oh yeah, definitely. That question comes up all the time.
Like, well, who's gonna take over your houses, or like, what are you gonna do with that? And it's always like, I don't know. I'm not dead yet. What the? Like, can I just live first? But I think again that's coming from a place of self-centeredness. I think it's a little selfish, a little self-motivated.
For me, like, I think my mom just did, she's literally my best friend, you know? Like, I literally told her when I lost my virginity, okay? And it was not, I was not supposed to be having sex at that age, okay? So, but she, you know, she was there to guide me through everything. You know, she guided me through everything in life. And I want, for when I'm gone, for just my daughter to say, my mom was the best. She did everything she could do. You know, I lived a great one, and hopefully if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, then it will show in the end. And I don't want to say it's more for me. The main thing is we want our children to be happy. Again, legacy is such a strong word, but for me, that's the main thing, is for her to be happy. And if I leave that behind, I'll be somewhere else extremely happy about it.
I just think it's been wonderful to hear all the different perspectives. I have tears in my eyes right now because I think you're all so sharing and so real. And I think the most important thing is not about do we have kids or not, it's about do we have good people in our lives. And that's the most important thing.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Meeting you. Nice to meet you.